Hey lovelies, my name is Charlotte and welcome to or back to my channel. So if you're following these videos in chronological order, then you will have picked your yarn, chosen your needles, you will have cast on, you have learnt the knit stitch and the purl stitch maybe, and now you're ready to finish your piece off. So that's what I'm going to be talking about this video. I'm going to be teaching you 3 different methods that I've used before to finish off my knitted pieces. I'm going to go through the pros and cons and just kind of what I recommend for you guys. I upload to my YouTube channel every Wednesday, but if you want to hang out with me before then, I do stream on Twitch every Monday, Tuesday and Thursday. I stream a knit and natter and hang out with you guys, so go check me out at Smikle Goes Knitting. I also have an Instagram where I post all of my finished objects and work in progresses, so if you want to go follow me and see what I'm working on, it's at Smikle Goes Knitting on Instagram. And I also have a Patreon where you can support me and receive some nice benefits in reward for that, so please do go check that out if you're interested. All of these links are in the description. If you like this video, please do give me a like. It really helps me out and lets me know what sort of content you guys want me to create for you. Next week, I'm going to be teaching you how to weave in ends and stitch panels together. So if you've made panels for a jumper or a scarf, or you just want to weave in your ends, I'll teach you how to weave those ends in and how to stitch pieces together to create your final piece. If you're looking forward to that, please do click the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss any of my uploads. And without further ado, let's get into the video. Before I get into teaching you these cast off methods, I do want to say, as with everything in knitting, there are so many different ways to do different things. So today I'm only going to be teaching you 3 beginner-friendly cast-off methods that I use quite a lot of the time, but there are different methods that are more appropriate for different stitches or different purposes. So in a later video I'll teach you which cast-off methods are better for ribbing and different stitch types, but now I'm only going to teach you the 3 basic ones that you're probably going to use on 85% of the knitting that you do. After doing my research, I found that there are so many different ways to cast off that it's probably going to be a multiple video long series on just how to cast off for different purposes. So if you are looking forward to that and finding out which cast off methods are better for each project, do hit that subscribe button.
Just to clarify, bind off and cast off mean the same thing.
Now the first method I'm going to teach you is called the standard cast off, and that is because it is generally the first cast off that anyone learns to do when knitting. You can do it knit stitch or purl stitch, I'll show you both ways, but this is probably the most beginner friendly one of them all.
So here you have your finished piece. I've just done a small one. What you want to do is slip the first stitch. So you want to insert the needle as if to knit it and then just slip the stitch off. Then you want to knit the second stitch. Now what you want to do is you'll have 2 stitches on your right hand needle. Using the left needle, insert that into the bottom stitch on the right hand needle and then bring this up and over the first stitch like so. Once you've done that, you will then knit the next stitch on the left needle and you will continue this process over again. So inserting the left needle into the bottom stitch and up and over the first stitch. And I just want to clarify that the bottom stitch refers to the stitch that's furthest away from the needle tip, not the order in which you knit them. So the bottom stitch is furthest away from the needle tip, goes up and over the stitch closest to the needle tip. You want to continue doing this until you have 1 stitch left on your left hand needle. So now you have 1 stitch left. You want to knit into that stitch, pull the bottom stitch up and over that last stitch, and then what you want to do is cut a bit of a tail. Some people like to tie a knot at this point, and I'll show you how to do that later, but I just pull it all the way through. I just wanted to quickly show you that if you ever have to purl bind off, you do the exact same thing with the standard bind off. So you slip one, knit the second, pull the bottom one over the top, and just continue this as you would normally, but purling. So when you get to this point, some people like to cut a tail and then they make a knot to make the end more secure. So what you do is you pull the tail and push it through the loop that you have and then pull it tight.
Now for the pros and cons. The pros are that this is very beginner friendly and it's very easy to learn. Another pro, it's very quick to do once you're very used to the motion of doing it. Another pro is that this method works for most projects that you're going to be doing, so it's very useful. I know some people who use this method exclusively. And finally, it's very rigid and strong cast off method, so it's very good for projects that do need that extra strength in the edges. Now for the cons. First con is that although it is strong and rigid, that's not always good for projects that need a bit of stretch. So it's very inflexible, and so it's not good for things like socks or collars, as they may be too tight around the collar. Another con is that it's a very obvious cast off row, so you'll see it very clearly when you are looking at knitted pieces. You'll see where it's finished, and it's just slightly different than the rest of the knitting, so that's something to keep in mind. Finally, it is very easy to cast off too tight with this method. So that's an issue when you want a little bit of stretch maybe, or if you want a perfect square. If you cast off too tight, it will start to taper inward, and it'll make it difficult if you're knitting panels together if they're two different sizes because of the tension issues. The second method I'm going to teach you is called the stretchy bind off. It may be known by other names, but I've commonly found it known as the stretchy bind off. It's very beginner friendly, and as it says in the name, it's stretchier than the standard bind off.
To start this bind off, you will knit the first 2 stitches. Then you want to put them back onto the left hand needle like so, and then you'll want to knit those 2 stitches together. So now you have 1 stitch on the right hand needle. To continue this, what you want to do is knit the next stitch and then place both the stitches on the right hand needle back to the left hand needle and then knit those 2 together again, and you continue this until you get to 1 stitch left on your left hand needle. Now you have one stitch left on your left hand needle. You want to knit that, slip both the stitches onto your left hand needle, knit those two together, and then you'll either pull it all the way through like I do, or you can tie a knot and then fasten it and pull it all the way through. As you can see here, this bind off is very stretchy. Again, the purl version, if you need to bind off on a purl row, it's exactly the same as knitting but purling. So you purl the first 2 stitches, then you slip those back onto your left hand needle, and then you purl those 2 together.
Now for the pros and cons of the stretchy bind off. For the pros, as it says in the name, it's a very stretchy bind off, so it's a lot better for projects that need that extra stretch. This method is really easy for beginners. Once you're able to knit, you're able to knit 2 together, so it's very good and useful for beginners. And like the standard bind off, it can be used for many different projects, so it's quite versatile. Now for the cons, like the standard bind off, the cast off edge is very obvious, which I've mentioned before is not great for certain projects. Also, if you do cast off too loose, making it extra stretchy, the cast off edge doesn't look as neat as some of the other methods, so that's something that you may need to consider. The final con is that it's not the most stretchy. I know the name is stretchy bind off, but it's not the most stretchy bind off out there, and it may not be appropriate for those projects that do need that extra stretch, for example socks. The final method I'm going to be teaching you is called Jenny's Magic Stretchy Bind Off. I wanted to include this method because it is stretchier than the stretchy bind off, and it's my preferred bind off method, so I usually bind off most of my projects with this. I think an important thing to remember when binding off is the more yarn used to bind off, the stretchier the bind off will be. So this bind off method uses that extra bit of yarn that wouldn't be used in the previous bind off methods.
So you start this method by yarning over clockwise, which is different to how you would wrap if you were knitting continental. So just yarning over, you don't knit anything, you just wrap the yarn around your right hand needle clockwise. You then want to knit the first stitch, and then you want to do as you do in the standard bind off and pull the bottom stitch up and over, and that's how you set it up. Then you want to yarn over and then knit the next stitch. However, this time you want the bottom 2 stitches to go up and over the first stitch, so you can either do them one at a time like you can see here, or as you'll see in a second, you can do them both at the same time. And you want to repeat this pattern continually, yarning over, knitting one, and then pulling the bottom 2 stitches up and over. This may look really complicated, but once you get into the flow of it, it's not that bad. Just yarning over, knitting one, and then pulling the bottom 2 stitches up and over the top stitch. Something I find really helpful is curling the finger that my yarn is wrapped around quite tightly when yarning over. Obviously not too tightly, otherwise then you won't be able to pull it over the top stitch, but just making sure you've got a good tension there so that it doesn't look loose and slide around and everything. Like the other bind off methods, you want to continue to do this until you have one stitch left on your right hand needle. Once you get to this point, you want to yarn over, knit the stitch on the right hand needle, pull the bottom 2 stitches up and over the top stitch on the right hand needle, and then you want to cut the tail quite long and then either pull it through or knot it and then pull it through. As you may be able to tell, this edge looks a bit cleaner and chunkier, but a lot stretchier than the previous one.
So now the pros and cons of this method. So for the pros, one pro is that it is very stretchy, as in the name. It uses a lot of yarn, so it's very appropriate for those projects that do need that extra stretch. Another pro is, as I mentioned, I use it for everything. It's very appropriate to be used for most projects. I have only used a different type of cast off for specific patterns that call for different cast off edges. But other than that, I've used this. Now for the cons, one con is that it uses more yarn than other cast off methods, so you need to make sure you add that into your calculations when buying your yarn. Again, if you do cast off too loose, it may overstretch and be too stretchy and not tight enough for certain projects. As with these cast off methods, another con is that it's a very obvious cast off edge. And finally, this method is a lot trickier to get the hang of. I have used it for quite a while, but I would never dream of using it when I was first beginning to learn to knit. So this is something that you may need to work your way up to. So for my recommendations, as I probably made it obvious throughout the video, I think you should start with the standard cast off method. If you need something slightly stretchier, move on to Stretchy, and if you're feeling really adventurous, move on to Jenny's Stretchy bind off. As I mentioned, there's no worries if you don't get to grips with the other two. The standard bind off is perfectly fine. I used that exclusively for many years until I needed something with a bit more stretch. And I know knitters who exclusively use that bind off method. So if you're happy with standard bind off method, then use the standard bind off. If you are an avid knitter and you already know how to cast off and you're still watching the video, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for you. Please comment down below what your favourite cast off method is. So I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please do give me a like, because that lets me know more of what you guys want to see from my content. Now that we've casted off, we just have one more thing to do, finalising your knitted products, and that is weaving in ends and stitching panels together. So next week I'm going to be covering that in the video. So if you are excited for that, then please do subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss any of my uploads. As I mentioned, I upload to YouTube every Wednesday, but if you do want to knit with me before then, I stream on Twitch every Monday, Tuesday and Thursday, where I chat with you guys, knit together, and it's a lot of fun. I also host giveaways. I've recently finished my first giveaway, so there will be more to come. So if you like the idea of that, then please go check me out on Twitch. I also have my Instagram, where I post all of my finished objects and my work in progresses. So if you're interested in that, follow me at SmichaelGoesKnitting. I also want to see all your knitted objects. So if you use the hashtag SmichaelKnit, I'll be able to see what you're knitting and we can grow together. I hope you enjoyed this video and I look forward to hanging out with you next week. Stay wholesome.
A pair of jeans, a shirt or two,